Welcome to another episode of The Disruptors, where we're arming you with the tools you need to innovate within the physical therapy space by highlighting those who have come before you. I'm your host, Stephen Cohen. Now, let's get into it. Welcome to The Disruptors with a capital PT podcast, where we are going to highlight the amazing journeys of people that have disrupted for the better the physical therapy industry, how they got there, what they did in order to make innovation in this area more accessible to everyone. On today's first episode, I am so blessed to be joined by Dr. Maggie Henjum. So Dr. Maggie Henjum is both a PT practice owner and CEO of a managed service organization that helps 25 companies like Resilient PT and Movement treat more patients more profitably by aggregating the services so that clinicians can be clinicians. Dr. Henjum graduated from University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire with her BS in kinesiology. She then earned her doctorate at the University of Colorado. And because school didn't seem hard enough, she became the APTA Student Special Interest Group President. Additionally, she completed a postdoctoral fellowship in manual therapy through Evidence in Motion. She's been an adjunct faculty at South College and the University of Minnesota while working at TRIA, Orthopedic Center, Vivarent, and now Motion and Therapy Partners. And in her spare time today, she works for USA Ski and Snowboard. On a more personal front, she lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota with her wife and son, is a fun haver, and appreciates good Portuguese wine, as well as, I'm sure, does not discriminate against other varieties and locations. Dr. Henjum's impressive career shows a desire to help people. And that has been my experience in all of our interactions, a trait I hope all of us listening and watching, including myself, will learn how to activate 1 degree hotter as a part of this conversation today. Dr. Henjum, you're a disruptor in the most positive sense. Thank you for being on the show and welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's been really fun to get to know you. So it's going to be fun to have a conversation about healthcare, my favorite topic.
Mine as well. So my first question I want to start with is how did you get here, right? And feel free to skip over if there's things that don't help with the journey and go quickly. I know a bit of the story from our mutual friend Matt Kruger and how you broke out on your own, but I would love to hear your version and how you got here.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So as you shared, I came out of Colorado, and Colorado was a very fun state for PT. I came out at a time where private practice was just rampant, and there was a private practice on every corner. And I don't know, I just felt super jazzy about the career, I think as all new grads do. So I worked at a private practice and it was fun. I got to work out after hours, and I was a part of the community and taping ankles for somebody that just walked in. It was just like a really fun little family. And I moved back to Minnesota, as that's where I'm from. And I just couldn't find that same vibrancy of a clinic and company. And I thought it was my education deficit. So I was like, I'm going to go back for a fellowship. I want to learn more. I was just hungry for knowledge and growth. And so I went back and did that residency fellowship and came out of that and thought, gosh, I during that process kind of wrote down, what am I looking for? Like, what's my perfect job? Because we're all choosing, there's no perfect. There's always a negotiation. And so knowing your own personal wants, needs, and interests was a super good process for me to go through. And so I did that through fellowship, just kind of, again, just journaling. And at my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was like, this looks like a business plan. As it was like 50 pages. It was like very robust. It was, what I wanted, mission values, the type of care I like delivering, education focus, community inclusive, like all the little pieces of of my best moments at that previous job. And so I was like, oh, maybe you're right. And so I decided to open Motion in 2016, just because I wasn't able to really find the culture I was looking for. And I'm sure it was out there. I just, so no negatives against anything that happened at that time. I just wasn't really hitting that nail on that. So I started Motion, and in 2016, again, it's an intimidating landscape of how do I be an inclusive provider that accepts insurance, that allows all people to walk through my door? How do I make that? How do I create structures and systems to be able to support education and do all of the things I really wanted in my business plan that were attached to our mission? And I struggled to find the ability to do that on my own. And Therapy Partners was an existing company since the early 2000s, late 90s. And it was this beautiful landscape of it took away all the stuff I knew nothing about. Like it just took everybody together and said, hey, we'll take care of all the stuff that does not get you out of bed in the morning, the credentialing, the insurance, the EMR, the billing, revenue segment, all the stuff, HIPAA, IT, security, the things that just kind of embed the background that allow us to do the work that we wanted to do. So I joined Therapy Partners in 2016. And as the Therapy Partners owners were starting to age out and COVID happened, I think we were all kind of exhausted with just working during COVID. And so I went to the owners and said, what are you guys going to do? If I had the option today, I may retire as well. And they were looking to retire and succeed. And so I stepped into that role to be able to protect the mission of what they really set off to do, which is taking small practices that are value-based practices that really deliver high excellent care and giving them the services they wouldn't otherwise be able to obtain, to be able to maintain autonomy and independence, and focus on the things that we wake up to focus on, which is helping patients. And so now I live in the duality of those roles. I live as a provider, as a clinic owner, and I live in the Therapy Partners ecosystem as well to try to blend all of that together. So that's my story. Did that capture it?
I think it did. I think the Matt, event, right? So I believe you're treating one of his family members and then went and shadowed him for a day or something like that. And that stuck with him as something super impressive. And so that, he still remembers that.
Oh, I love that. No, we have such a cool, what I love about healthcare is I think we have the coolest community in the world. Like I would not want to go to a bankers association dinner. I love nothing against bankers, but I love healthcare. We all are, I think we're the only profession that, goes to a conference and we're there from 7 till 6 and we're learning. And then when we go out to dinner after, we're talking more about learning and like what we can do to help people and what we can do to create an evolution change around making healthcare about people again. And so I love getting out in the community and meeting people. That's like my favorite thing. So
I think there's definitely a difference in healthcare, but I think there's even a difference with PT within healthcare. Right? Physical therapy in particular is some of the most intra or inter-brand competitive that you see anywhere, right? It's amazing, especially in the private practice world. And there's a story that I think you'll love, which we onboarded a practice in West Virginia, and they're really, really excited. And I'm walking out with the owner, Natalie, and she points at another PT group's sign, because it's right where one of their clinic locations is. And like, hey, if this goes well for us, I'll introduce you to the owner of that. I know they've had some fits and stops with what they're using. So I'll just, let's see if this works and I'll just do that.
Yeah.
What do you mean? They're like, don't you compete against each other? Like, no, there's so many more patients to be seen that you can't look at this in a scarcity mindset because you're going to end up doing things that ultimately harm access to the patients and a lot of other negative things, right?
Yeah,
so
totally. What's better for everyone's better for everyone. So, and I think most people have that mindset. So that's a fun place to live.
I would agree entirely, and it's definitely through lived experiences that I have been convinced that PT is even more different in a positive way than healthcare, and then healthcare is different than other industries.
Yeah, I agree.
So I appreciate you saying that. So what we haven't talked about yet is why PT? So why physical therapy? So started out in kinesiology, right? Did you always want to go into PT from the time you entered college? When was that? I want to be a physical therapist moment.
Yeah. I remember trying to answer that question on applications and being kind of stunned by it, because I think I've always been a person where I identify what I want before what it looks like. Does that make sense? So, meaning I really liked people. I'm obviously an extrovert. I love people. I'm a puppy. So I wanted to spend a lot of time with people. I wasn't going to be happy behind a desk. I loved health and wellness. I loved movement. I loved relationship development. And PT just kind of hit all of those things, right? And so I started taking classes that interested me more than taking classes for a profession that I wanted to do. And it just kind of landed into the kinesiology where you're like, oh, I'm loving this. I love movement. I'm, athlete at heart. And I think it's everybody's story that started off in our world. We like to move. We like people. We want to help people move. And those just kind of sync and ease together. And I wish it was this like glamorous, the skies opened and I walked and saw a PT clinic that had everything I needed. It really wasn't. I like what I like, and I was taking what I enjoyed and identifying variables of what made me the best person and the happiest human. And I kind of just landscaped those into a profession, which is not a sexy story, but I think it's a real one. And I think, I spoke at a high school and there's, freshmen that are like, how'd you know you wanted to be a physical therapist? I was like, I didn't. I went to Eau Claire because it was sunny, it was like a nice day. And I was like, this looks fun. So I think there's a lot of pressure around, my 2.5-year-old, like, what are you going to be when you grow up? He's like, I don't know. I just want a popsicle, So I think the more focus on your relationship with work and your relationship with your passions and how to kind of cinch that together into a profession is, I don't know, maybe that's my bias because that's my journey, but I think that's been my experience. So
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Instead of identifying with to use maybe some younger terminology, the vibe, right, of a specific profession or what it entails. It's more of, I like these 5 or 6 things. Now, where does this Venn diagram best point me to? Like, what are the things that are in that Venn diagram that are really, really, really powerful, right? And yes, love helping people with movement, relationships, right? You get into likely something in either physical therapy. Maybe you could have had a career in almost more of the, I like to call it like tactical athlete wellness. So thinking of even like firefighters, police officers, right, which would still be in a branch of physical therapy. Like there could be, especially if you want to decide to go more higher performance, but wanted to help people, right? It could have taken you anywhere, but you knew, okay, it's got to be movement related. It's got to get me out from behind a desk, and it's got to be something where I can build a relationship with somebody, right? And when you put that Venn diagram together, it really shrinks your, sort of the universe for you, but that's a blessing, not a curse, right?
Yeah.
Where, okay, awesome. Now I don't have to worry about analysis paralysis. With all this, there's like 3 things that, that I really like, and now I just have to pick one. And picking 1 out of 3 is much, much easier than 1 out of 3 million, right?
Totally.
Much easier.
Julie Whitman, who's like a leader in our field, I love her as a human, always gives the best advice. And I believe that same thing about choosing your profession and choosing your employer, or starting your own practice, et cetera, whatever that looks like is, I think as PTs, we focus a lot on the outcome, like where do we want to get? And her biggest advice was focus on how you feel during the journey and identify those variables. Because, once you start like experiencing in your own emotions, like, oh, I feel really healthy and happy. This is my best self when X. And that was really powerful for me. So I started kind of slowing down to be able to do that and identifying, like as similar to how you choose your spouse, right? Like they're a part of my best self looks like X. And maybe that person isn't exactly what I thought they were going to be, but it is a very healthy experience as we can share life together. And that's the same way as a profession and an employer. So it was, talking through that with somebody that's been through that was really helpful for me at a really young age. So
that's amazing advice. So
not my advice, to make that very clear.
We'll make sure to cite our sources. We'll make sure to cite our sources. I can appreciate that. That very much. So let's document really how you feel during the journey and not a sole focus on the outcome. I think that's sage advice from Julie, and that it's held true for me as well, right? Like, okay, I like these things. All right, well, what does that look like? Well, probably means you're starting your own company.
Right.
And then, okay, where do you put it? Like, well, I've had a lot of physical therapy myself with blowing out my shoulder, blowing out my knee, and then now as a national level Olympic weightlifter, just it's not if, it's when and how many. And I get ahead of it with tweets. I'm in. Perfect. Headed to my PT. There's just I don't wait on it. And thank goodness for direct access in Kansas.
Yeah.
So it makes it really, really easy.
I didn't know you were an Olympic weightlifter. I feel like we need to pause on that. The world needs to know more about that. I feel like, is there? Am I interviewing you? Because I'd like to learn.
I'll keep it very short because this is your session, not mine. Started out doing consulting for manufacturing companies through Deloitte. Was my first expense card. Was flying around everywhere. All that. Got fat, and then looked up at an airport. I was at an airport Chili's. I still vividly remember this at airport Chili's and saw CrossFit on TV.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to look more like that than I do like this. Yeah. So that I got into CrossFit for a few years, really liked the barbell stuff. And so have been competing in Olympic weightlifting. And I'm not super strong by any stretch, but luckily in the genius minds of the USAW, that you can either get stronger or get older and hit the masters divisions, and they lower the required total amount lifted for some more of their premier competitions. So that's my advice now. If you can't get stronger, get older. And luckily, everyone can follow it. So
I love that. I really do. I love that.
So now I compete as a masters in the masters division, and yeah, it is nice not having to compete against some 18-year-old just straight beast of a human that weighs the same amount and can squat somewhere in the 600-700 pound range. It's just there's some amazing humans out there. Absolutely amazing humans.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit.
Great.
And we're gonna probably do this quite a bit, right?
No,
Keep you on your toes. It'll make it more fun. So talk to me about your proudest achievement or achievements. And I actually want to start outside of physical therapy. So as you look back at some of the things you're the most proud of, and maybe it's a process that you went through versus the outcome, to go back to Julie's advice, right? What is one or two of those really proud achievements you've had outside of physical therapy?
Oh, good question. I would say I'm going to do the cheesy. I'm kind of a cheesy person. I'm going to do the cheesy one and say our kid is so fun. And he is just like watching him exude kindness and sharing and kisses for grandma when he senses sadness. And, last night the dog bit my finger and I was like, ooh, and he's like, oh, I'll get you a paper towel, mama. He's 2.5, by the way, for everybody. So he's not like 18 saying mama, which is fine. But he is watching your child exude kindness to the world is it throws me for a whole new sense of emotions. So I know that's probably a hokey answer to a simple question, but that is my favorite thing in the world, is to watch him be sweet to others.
Well, I mean, and I'm about a year behind you, right? So my little guy is 18 months.
Yep.
And they do pick up on everything you do, right? If you want to look in a mirror, just see how your child acts, right? And I'm already starting to see that with him, and it sounds like you're further along in that process. And I'm sure others that are watching or listening, just wait.
Just wait. I know.
Just you two wait.
And on the flip side, he'll sit at this desk and say, 2 minutes, I'm working. And I'm like, ooh. Least proud moment, Stephen. Yes, they are always watching. And it is really fun to watch them, exude kindness. Like, that is just like the most simple task, to just be kind to somebody. And so that's my favorite thing and my most proud moment of this last year. Be that my wife, which is probably true. It's fun to see. So
there's a lot there, and it's this idea that I've had about this idea of a karma flywheel, right? And so There's the business flywheel, right? Where, oh, you do something right, okay, it starts to really work, and then it builds on itself. You get referrals to others, and all of a sudden, just whoa, like this thing is just growing so fast.
Yeah.
And I fully believe there is a karma flywheel where if you put good into the world, it is likely to have a positive reverberation that affects more and more and more, right? And you make that karma flywheel, and maybe we should call it kindness flywheel. Maybe that's a more apt name, but that you're creating that, right? And I think that's really special for not only you and your family, but also everyone your family touches.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good that will be driven from that focus, and that focus on kindness. It's so lacking today, especially when you get outside of the soft bubble that PT is, right? You get outside of it, it's very different. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. It's a great story. And so now to flip to inside, more career oriented, right? Yeah. So what are one or two of your proudest achievements within your career?
10 years ago, I would have responded with, this textbook or this thing I did, or this achievement I did, or the USA ski or whatever. And and all of those were really cool. And they took a lot of sacrifice from people around me and time and energy as well. But now the things that get me out of bed and truly make me feel like that's my biggest happiness or my biggest accomplishment was even recency bias this weekend. We just got together as a team. For our annual, we always get to, do our annual business planning, look forward, and then celebrate. And we celebrate in healthcare in January because December is hard. And so we do that every year. And so we had, our 65 plus employees hanging out, and we did we always do a couple games, who wins at bowling. And we always do here's our mission values. Here's the 4 things we live and die by. And we, identify who was the most aligned with those this last year. And we all vote for each other, right? Who kicked ass the most in these 4 ways. It was so fun this year. I got teary when it got done because almost everybody tied. It was like everybody voted for everybody, and it was everybody had some variables and some votes. And only one person made it by 1 extra vote. And I was like, that is the best testament, is that everybody in that room, it believes in small healthcare, believes in delivering the mission, believes in where we're going and why. And that was one of those moments where I just wanted to leave and be like, you guys got this. You guys are kicking ass. This is absolutely not me. This is everybody in the room. So that was one of my most proud moments. But again, that was 48 hours ago or 3 days ago. So recency bias for sure. Maybe, but I'm going to go back to something you said earlier, right? So you opened Motion in 2016 because you couldn't find the right culture that you wanted to be a part of, right? At their practice. Mm-hmm. To me, that feels very full circle, right? Is you found yourself right in the middle of it, and it probably, didn't take 14 years. Okay, boom, done, right? Yeah. But that, if I'm going to go back to that, I have to imagine it felt like this thing I wanted, this experience that, not 14, sorry, 8, 8 years ago, this thing I wanted to create is here, and it's helping people. Yeah. Yeah. And it's cool. And even the therapy partner side of that, it helps people help people, so it's all a part of the same endpoint. And so the moments that I feel the most proud are the moments of when people have no idea that I own the company and I am the last person in line, and everybody in front of me is more of a mission driver than I am. That is my favorite. So I think the older I get, the more I find more value through other people leading the way and taking that process to the next level. And I don't think I felt that way in my 20s. I think I felt more about how I was able to deliver that. So I think my ego has declined, and I hope it continues to decline because it's been really fun to kind of lean into that, and just really enjoy others. So
I love that. One of the things we enjoy, especially when we go to conferences, is to see how long of a streak we can go when we're going to restaurants, bars, coffee shops, wherever, to see how long we basically can go to where someone doesn't give me the check. Where it's like, oh, there's like, it just doesn't seem like, oh, like he's not, being arrogant or a boss or anything like that.
Yeah.
It must go to someone else. So we love to see it. At PPS, it was ridiculous. It was like 12 or 13 places we went to, something like that, where they would give it to Amanda or Tom or Ashley or somebody else on the team. And it's yes, that was a very personal. Yes, that is a very good sign.
I agree.
That's so cool. You had that moment. That's so cool that you had that moment, and happy for you. And
it's fun. It's fun to again, we're all small business is fun because you're so closely tied to what you do, and everybody has a direct contact point with that. And I hope that always remains, so I feel viciously protective over that.
And you have to be, right? Because you get what you allow.
Yeah.
And that, you have to be
totally
vicious is a very good word. And I think anyone who has joined your team and joined for the culture, a vicious attack dog type mentality for anything that would take away from that, I would have to imagine would be received extremely positively and not negatively.
Yeah, totally. And I have to PSA for people that are listening. We are not always there is moments as a business owner where you fail at that one, right? So it's like my failures as a parent every so often, right? Do not let the perfection be the limiter of that. There are moments that I feel crappy or COVID or, insert whatever here. I think it's not every perfect day or perfect year, but it's a perfect for me. So.
And even intraday, right?
Good
being
point.
a business owner is a roller coaster, and it's not always day-to-day roller coaster. Sometimes it's hour to hour, minute to minute, and being able to handle those highs and lows is you have to be able to do that. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and maybe actually stay on that topic for a little bit, right? Because I've even seen it where there's this misconception, I think, that oh, they're the boss, they have it all figured out, or oh, they're growing, they have it all figured out, and that's not it, right? At all, it's not the case, and you're constantly finding ways that you can improve. And there is one more quote I'll give you before we go into that a little bit, because to your point on making mistakes, right? And that's why we forgive. And I read this in a book earlier this week that if it weren't for forgiveness, our highest watermark would be the lowest point in our lives. Yeah. Right. And so and that starts with forgiving yourself, I think. And I know that's a real problem for me of just not, hammering myself. How'd you make that mistake? That was so stupid. How could you do that? How can anyone trust you? Right. I definitely face a lot of that internally, and hope to be able to improve on that.
Thank you for listening to this episode. This would not be possible without the sponsorship of SaRA Health. SaRA is the relationship operating system for physical therapy practices, driving better patient outcomes, improved arrival rate, and improved financial margins. If you'd like to learn more, check them out at SaRA, SaRA Health.com, SaRAHealth.com. And if you'd be interested in advertising with us and helping us produce even more great stories, please let us know at steven@SaRAHealth.com. Now, back to the episode.
Let's talk through that a little bit, right? So you get bad news. You have a bad day.
Yeah.
One, I think everyone should expect that, right? It is not all roses and butterflies, and the stuff you see on Instagram isn't real, or at least the cadence and the context isn't real. Maybe the picture itself was, maybe. But right, and even on LinkedIn, right? Oh, they just announced a great partnership, and oh well, but here's the bones about it, the real story. So for those that are maybe that have started, right? Let's start. You think back and to when you first started, and some of those really tough days and probably really tough nights, right? what are some lessons that you learned, right? That you wish Maggie in 2017 would have known?
Yeah. I think, I think like even starting in our profession, you feel like, well, if I could just learn more, I'll get everybody better. And so you just get really comfortable in the gray, because the more you know, the less you know. And the really what you learn is to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing. And I think that was a process and I had to evolve with that, because that was really good for me to go through, and good to meet people who I thought knew it all. And they were like, we know nothing. Healthcare is complicated. Good work. And I'm like, what? And I feel that same evolution with business. It's like, well, if I just learn more, and I think we're always looking at people ahead of us, especially because, like you said, it's so easy to see on social media and quick quips. And, and I was talking to somebody at Graham Sessions last week, and she's like, you know so much. I'm like, oh, I know nothing. It's just and I think because of that, when we hit a pain point, like, oh, this is a painful day, or we look for a solution, like a quick fix of, maybe a partnership or this or that, and don't just sit in it and let yourself be uncomfortable, because it might just be the discomfort of growth. And that's been hard for me. And I'm a communicator, and I love experience sharing. So, I joined, a couple groups this last year to start talking about that, because it felt kind of lonely in that journey. And it was really good, because it did the same thing that happened when I was trying to learn more science to get people better faster. Like the same experience sharing happened there, where it's the more you know, the less you know, and everybody's in it together. And, learning those bumps and bruises and sitting in the discomfort was a process. And so, I think that's the message is, there is no end point. There is no like, when you get here, this is what will happen. It's like every chapter is a little painful for a different reason, and we're such biased creatures. I look at my wife all the time. I'm like, remember when we were little and we were just me in a room? And she's like, you painted the 20-foot ceiling. Do you remember that? And I was like, oh, I don't. Did we? She's like, we sure did. And you were like there at like 3 a.m. You don't remember that? And I was like, not really. I just remember playing soccer in the gym and drinking beer with a patient. But it's like every chapter has its thing, and it's like, what are you tolerating? What are you comfortable with? And what are you striving for? And what's your outcome? And I think I think that was just been helpful for me to vocalize over this last couple of years. So
that there's two things there. I think one is a very tactical piece of advice, and one is a more mentality, particularly shift or adaptation. One, and I completely agree with this, surround yourself with people who are going through the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, do that. It doesn't have to be a mini. It can be one. It can be two. It probably loses efficacy at 6 or 7, if I had to guess. I'm sure there's a Harvard Business Review article out there about the exact size that or maybe it's Stanford's Business School or somewhere else has a really good article on it, and maybe I'll be able to find that for the show notes. Find that, right? And there's a guy that he and I both started health tech companies at the same time. We were both at UCLA at the same time, and we have kept in touch over the last getting on 7 years now. And every other week, with a miss here and there, we've had what we call founders therapy, and we just talk about the lived experiences, and it's so helpful. It is so helpful to just have that sounding board and actually hear what reality is for others that are in your similar position. So I think that's really, really good. That's a really good piece of advice that I have abided by and could not suggest more. And you mentioned being uncomfortable being comfortable with the unknown, right? In the gray. And I think that reminds me of some advice that I got. I think it's similar, just different, almost different phrasing is, if you're running a small company or if you're running any company, there's 1,000 fires you could put out, and it's your job to figure out which fire is the biggest and needs to be put out the quickest, and be comfortable letting other fires burn. And it's extremely apt, right? And I'm sure you look out at Therapy Partners and at Motion. I know I look out at SaRA Health, and I'm like, man, we need to fix a lot of things. but we have limited resources to be able to do so. And so making those decisions and being comfortable with being wrong in those too, right? Like, should have fixed that thing first. We should have done that first, but oh well.
I do think like it's so cool because doing that is what being a provider is, right? Like you look at something and you're like, I want to make that more mobile. I want to make that, tolerate load better. I want to change the movement behavior, whatever you decide, right? And it's understanding what you're trying to drive towards and keeping the site there and understanding the people and the process and the ecosystem and the socioeconomic status and all of the variables that influence that process. And being able to take those, digest those, but keep it simple. And so you do that, like, and you imagine you do that, how many reps a week in a practice setting. And so you get a lot of reps on like, oop, that was wrong. Oop, that was wrong. And you don't get that many reps as an owner as in the same way. It's not like you get to, it's like try to drive towards a business plan 60 times in 1 week. But it's the same thing. It's just trying to digest information, get okay with a person coming back and saying they're worse, or an employee coming back and saying they're frustrated, or a vendor, a client coming back and saying they're not happy. That's the same thing. It's just new. So newness creates difficulty. And I always remind myself of that. Like, it's the same process. It's like, you just have more reps in one process, but tolerating the same emotion on being a business owner is similar.
There's the old adage of feedback is a gift, right? Yeah. And that is a big piece of our culture we're very, very proud of is the more critical the feedback, the more thankful we are, because we knew it was uncomfortable, especially for a physical therapist to send that. And
because we're nice.
Y'all are nice. Yes. Agreed.
So no, you're right. It's a great mentality to have. And it sets your team up to orient towards that, right? Like it sets everybody up that feedback because it's all about being better and serving and delivering. And so it's not about us, and I tell patients that all the time, like, it doesn't hurt my feelings if your works. It just gives me information, like to help you get better. So it's the same. Yeah. So
I love it. So got 2 more topics I want to hit, and then we'll be able to cut and be able to hopefully help some people out. The last question is, if you had a magic wand, what would you fix in PT? If you want to brought into healthcare, you can, but you get a magic wand, right? As of tomorrow, everyone wakes up and this one thing is different.
Oh my gosh. I had an idea and then I was like, nope, that's not right. Had another idea. I was like, not that one. Cause it's like the genie question. I want more wishes. That's my run wish.
I want 4 more wands. I
want more. So, because at first I was going to say, I wish we knew as providers the value of what we deliver in healthcare. Because I wish that we had the confidence and inwardly to know how great we are as PTs to the global healthcare system. Like, I think we are the best, most forefront of being able to solve healthcare issues across movement, exercise, and community, right? Like, that's hugely important to people. And then, of course, like I say, confidence. And I'm like, yeah, but we should have the confidence and no focus. Like, I think as a profession, sometimes we disjoint and we all similar to that. Like, you try to grab different things of, I want this in my state or this in my setting. And I wish we could just move as a system together, and tribe together towards that endpoint of making the world a better place through movement and community. And so I think it's both focus of our profession matched with the confidence of our profession,
So there's 2 pieces on that I want to share, because I think I think it is exactly right. And so the symptom of not having that, right? And my wife is I'd love for you to meet one day. We'll have to make that happen. Yeah. She's a nurse practitioner, and she rounds at a couple skilled nursing facilities that are turning much more into hospitals than they should. It's a whole other thing. If those patients and residents could move and could move well, it's a new world for a lot of people. It's a new world for a lot of providers. It's a new world for payers. It's a new world. Like I don't think we can even fathom what the impact would be if everyone could move well.
Yeah.
I don't think we can fathom it. We could probably look at some of maybe the European countries who have, very high rates of mobility and an ability to ambulate to the later years, and love watching the documentary Blue Zones, right?
I was just thinking about that. I just watched that a couple weeks ago.
Oh, so good. So good. And right, just getting up off the floor, right? And I really love what Dr. Peter Attia has put out in his book Outlive and the idea of health span. And so I've started adding in some of those stability exercises. The most humbling of which has definitely been the stand on one leg and balance with your eyes closed. Yeah. That humbled me. Like, oh, wow.
You're like, I move weight heavy.
Yeah. In one plane. That's my problem. Adding those in has been great, and get a little bit off a tangent, but I think you're right. And then, so there's two pieces there, right? The impact of poor movement and how the profession is not able to treat as many people as would be optimal for our society. Yeah. And then you're hitting on another piece where the value is not known. And if I take a bit more cynical approach to that, I think the value is known and it's being hidden because the PT industry has accepted the current reimbursement model as it is today for the most part, although with cash pay and others and direct to employer, right? You're starting to see more of these other flavors. And why are they doing well? Why is Pro Team Tactical out in Indianapolis doing well? Yeah. It's because they figured out how to what I call is the value exhaust. So they figured out how to not let a bunch of value just go off into the ether to be grabbed by other people, but be able to show like, hey, we're reducing time off the truck, so the fire engine. We're helping people get back quicker. We're helping people not get injured, right? And we can see all that value because we see it more for end to end. Now that's a shorter time period, right? And there's all sorts of different things there, but you're hitting on two things which I think are incredibly important and aren't talked about enough, which is the impact of poor movement on that 80% of cost being in the last, 20% of life, hitting almost the Pareto principle perfectly. And then also this idea that I've had of value exhaust. So prior in more of the manufacturing consulting, there was data exhaust, right? Yeah. So data created that was not recorded or used for any good purpose, but was being created and likely done via an extra action by somebody. That's bad. You want that to be as minimal as possible. And I think the physical therapy industry is suffering from a value exhaust where just plumes of exhaust are going out into the ether and the value is not being captured by those delivering the care. And I do hope to see that change. And I guess I'm not waiting on hope. I'm going to try. We're going to be a piece of that. Yeah. And not the silver bullet, but we're going to be a piece, and we're going to make some lives better. So
I totally agree. And it's interesting because it's like, we know we are best for healthcare seen early, right? And managing things on the front end. Like we know that. And so as a profession to align ourselves with that and push towards that as a conglomerate is super important, right? But you see all these models where that's not the case. People get x-rays, MRIs, see their primary orthopedist, then PT 9 months later. And they're backed up and cog in the wheel because it's, there's a shortage and there's this huge convergence of we're not seeing the models that amplify what we know. We're not seeing the payment that amplifies what we know. But it's not a binary discussion. It's not like, well, then, if we can't see this, then we leave. It's like, it has to be a robust and ever evolving conversation, just like we've had this conversation in its entirety of this hour. So, and being okay with the gray zone and thinking outside the box and knowing where we're going as a profession knowing that just captures the middle 2/3 maybe, but we're focused. We see the value. We're gonna totally support and love all the things that ancillarily come out of that. I would love that. We all woke up and we knew that middle 2/3. We centralized around that. We saw the value prop there, and we were able to deliver that. Because I think as a profession, we're best suited to do it. So,
I couldn't agree more. As someone who has been through it as a patient multiple times, and will be again multiple times.
Yeah.
So we're going to end with a final question, which is, what advice would you give for someone listening or watching who wants to make a dent in the PT universe, right? So who wants to make a change, who maybe they're in a practice right now. I want to try this new thing. I think it'll be really helpful for providers. I think it'll be really helpful for patients, right? What advice would you give for that person who wants to make that dent, but is struggling to make that first step?
Yeah, I think just identifying the barrier, right? Like, is it your confidence to do it? Is it time? Is it your employer is not well aligned with that same value set? Is it that, you're burned out and you don't have the ability to shine that light, and I think getting clear on why is always the first step, right? It's like the barrier is the biggest thing to identify to be able to move forward. And I'm biased to think like, if you get really clear on, the passion and maintaining that bright light, you're able to overcome the barrier. You're able to overcome the bad day, maybe the employer that doesn't agree with that same trajectory. And you say, you know what, fine, then I'm going to do it over here, or I'm going to build it like you did, or whatever that looks like. And so, but I think if you hone in on the like why and maintain that light and maintain that and protect that, you're able to move forward. And so I think like having the courage to ask why, just like having the courage to ask a patient, like if they're worse, better, or the same. And I think building that courage and talking to others is the best thing to do. So that would be my advice. So I don't know if that's hits the nail on the head, but
it does, right? And I think to take that even a step further, or to expand upon it a little bit, is figuring out exactly what that barrier is. Yes, but also making sure that barrier is a real barrier, right? Yeah. And not something that you've conjured up in your brain, right? Yeah. And I've had it, right? Like, I could start this company and it could help a lot of people. But I'm going to go in I'm going to put myself out there and my family out there financially, and we could end up on the streets, and that'd be really bad.
Right.
And then that's fake. That's not real. That is not real. The likelihood that that's going to happen is so infinitesimally low that it's not even worth considering, right? But that's that other voice, right? That can get in your brain. And so I completely agree with you. Find what that barrier, that first barrier, right, that you get over, because inertia is a hell of a drug, right? Once you get going, find that first barrier and make sure it's real. Yeah. Make sure it's not just some conjured up demon in your head that just needs to be told to sit down and they don't have a place here anymore.
Totally. I love playing the worst case scenario game. I'll play it like with our lawyers. I'm like, worst case scenario, I forgot to pay sales tax. Tell me what the feds show up in a black car. I get handcuffed and move away. We have not, by the way, for the record, like whatever that thing is, and like, it's often not as bad as you think. It's like, you just pay a fine and say sorry or whatever. And you're like, oh, okay. Cause I think we're very much wired to think worst case scenario is so much worse and further standing than it might be. So, and I think, that's a huge barrier for me often. And so just vocalizing that and getting comfortable, playing that out is always a really good thing. So
yeah, the thing you come up with in your head is probably 100 times worse than whatever reality could ever throw at you.
Totally. And PTs, we are absolutely the people that do that. We play worst case scenario in a very grandiose way all the time. So I'm included in that same process. So just vocalize it. Say it out
loud. I love it. We've covered quite a few things today, and I think some of my key takeaways and what I've learned and definitely am excited about is, making sure that for folks out there, like, how do how do I create the practice I want to be in, right? And so for those listening, how do you create that environment that you want to be in? And like with Maggie's stories and others that we'll tell, it's possible. You absolutely can do it. And here is Exhibit A. The other Julie Whitman's advice, I think, is so good, right? And how do you feel during the process, and what are those different things during the process that you either love or hate, right? Or some others may call it give you energy or take energy. Yeah. And you're always going to have a combination of that, but try not to let it get out of kilter, or else it gets to be a really bad day. And then I think on the last piece, I really love it. Like, identify that first barrier, make sure it's real, and then get over it and see what happens next.
Yeah.
So, Maggie, I want to say thank you so much for the time today, and I'm sure if our listeners could thank you as well, they would. Thank you for being on Disruptors, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Disruptors. I hope that you were able to take one or two things away that you can apply immediately to your own innovation journey. As always, I'm your host, Stephen Cohen. This is sponsored by SaRA Health. Let's keep moving.